During the 1980s, Iraq fought a long and costly war against Iran, so Saddam Hussein had to try and rebuild the nation but faced a series of challenges. He feared an Arabian anti-Iraqi coalition was being formed when his rival, Assad of Syria, held talks with Kuwait and Egypt. He refused to pay back debts to his neighbours and accused Kuwait of side drilling into the Rumailian oil field which lay in Iraq. He also accused Kuwait of breaking the oil production quotas implemented by OPEC, and this reduced the price of oil and cost Iraq billions. But Kuwait had long been claimed by Iraq because it was part of the Ottoman province of Basra, and Saddam began threatening military action against Kuwait in 1990, saying they were acting on behalf of the US. The Americans had supported Hussein during his war with Iran, but Iraq had been allied with the Soviet Union during the Cold War and supported the PLO in their fight against Israel. Nevertheless, as Saddam Hussein moved troops near to Kuwait, the Americans held the Jeddah talks with him in July 1990. During the talks, they agreed that Kuwait should pay compensation for the use of the Rumaila oil fields. However, Kuwait only offered $9 billion out of the promised $10 billion. Hussein used this as a cause for war and invaded 2 days later. The Iraqi army, which hadn't fully demobilized, was one of the largest in the world with over 1 million troops, thousands of tanks and hundreds of planes. Kuwait's army of a few thousand couldn't put up much resistance, so in 2 days the country was under Iraqi control. The Kuwaiti government and thousands of refugees fled to Saudi Arabia, while Saddam put his cousin Ali Hassan al-Majid, or Chemical Ali, in control of Kuwait. Iraqi troops then deployed to the Saudi border, so the US, on August the 7th, launched Operation Desert Shield. Aircraft carriers, artillery and 500,000 troops were sent to Saudi Arabia to deter Saddam from attacking and capturing the oil-rich border regions. Meanwhile, the UN condemned the invasions and put strict sanctions on Iraq, but the Arab League was split because some nations like Libya and Sudan and even the PLO backed Saddam Hussein. So Saddam Hussein gave a list of demands including Israeli withdrawal from Arab land, Iraqi access to the Persian Gulf and even a favourable trade deal with the US. Plus he also appeared on TV with Western hostages. But the US was unwilling to negotiate, so the UN gave Iraq until mid-January 1991 to pull out of Kuwait or be forced out. President Bush spent this time making a coalition, and this coalition of over 30 nations included Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Syria and Egypt, most of Western Europe and even countries like Japan and Senegal. The deadline for withdrawal passed, so on January 17th, Operation Desert Storm was launched. A massive air campaign dropped over 100,000 bombs, destroying a great deal of Iraq's air force, communication facilities and Scud missile launchers. However, Iraq responded by launching Scud missiles into Israel, hoping Israel would retaliate and declare war, and Hussein would then get the backing of other Arab nations. But the US kept Israel from responding, so Iraq tried to move into Saudi Arabia in late January. At the border town of Khafji, the Iraqis were quickly driven out by the coalition army backed by air support, but the coalition waited until mid-February before countering. In the meantime, special forces were sent behind enemy lines to scout out Iraqi troop movement, while Iraqi scouts were specifically targeted. Plus, the coalition tanks were far superior to the Iraqis' Soviet and locally produced tanks, so they quickly captured Iraq's defensive bunkers on the border. And just before troops moved into Iraq, a huge artillery barrage destroyed over 20 Iraqi artillery battalions. Then on the 15th of February, the Americans feigned an attack on Wadi al-Batin. This tricked the Iraqis into reinforcing their position in the south. The coalition instead swept through the now relatively undefended deserts of southern Iraq, while mainly Arab troops held the border of Kuwait. The coalition did face some opposition on the 26th and 27th of February, like large tank battles at 73 Easting, al-Basuya and Medina Ridge, but the Iraqis proved incapable of stopping the advance, so Saddam ordered a full retreat. Although Marines still had to fight to gain control of the Kuwaiti International Airport, the emir was restored to power, and he quickly began to persecute suspected Iraqi sympathizers. Plus, as the Iraqis retreated, their convoy was heavily bombed, and this road was dubbed the Highway of Death. But the retreating Iraqis did set fire to hundreds of oil wells before signing a ceasefire on the 28th. The coalition chose not to advance on Baghdad because they thought a rebellion would topple Saddam. There were some rebellions, notably the Kurds in the north and the Shia groups and demoralized soldiers in the south, but the promised aid didn't arrive and the rebellions were crushed. And despite continuous sanctions, Saddam Hussein remained in power until the American second invasion in 2003.
August 1990. Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein sends his army into neighboring Kuwait. Its oil fields are rich for the taking, and Hussein may have his eye on Saudi oil too. Saudi Arabia quickly gathers its allies. The 39-nation coalition is the largest since World War II. They vow to bring Hussein to his knees.
Withdraw from Kuwait or face a coalition ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
8 Apaches from the 101st Airborne Division prepare for the 200-mile flight into Iraq.
We had to take out the radar sites at 2:38 in the morning, so all the aircraft could fly through this corridor.
The Apaches take off and speed across the desert, cruising just 50 feet above the ground to avoid radar detection. There's a total blackout on navigation lights, total radio silence. If Hussein's radar detects them, they risk being shot down by the very target they've come to kill. It takes just over 2 hours for the Apaches to reach the radar towers. When they're 5 miles away, they hover for a moment, surveying their target. This is actual footage from General Cody's mission, the very first Apache strikes of Desert Storm.
When we pulled the trigger, all 4 aircraft shot at the same time. You got 4 to 6 Hellfires en route. The time of flight's about 12 seconds. And then all of a sudden they start hitting. And when they start hitting, things start exploding pretty quickly, especially when we hit where the generators and all the fuel was.
Okay, go to sets right here. Do it.
At about 4 kilometers, we started opening up with the rockets that had the flechette rounds, and that was to take out the air defense guns that were out in front. And then as we got closer, we'd open up with the 30 millimeter and finish off the job.
It's 4 minutes of mayhem with 100% destruction.
We put in excess of about 40 Hellfire missiles on the target, a couple hundred flechette rockets, and a lot of 30 millimeter, and then broke and flew low level back.
Destroying the radar towers opens up a piece of the sky 20 miles wide.
About 5 minutes into the flight back, we could see the jets coming in right over our head. And that's how the air war started.
Over 900 coalition aircraft make their way into Baghdad. Safe passage, courtesy of the Apache.